This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
The common saying is that the past is history and the future is a mystery. While the rearview mirror is smaller than the windshield, we always wish we could see more. It's those blind spots that hit us at the wrong time and highlight our weakness. Most will spend their lives trying to bulletproof their interactions and personality, thinking that we can see everything that will eventually come our way. As you age, you realize that there is always a dark specter looming in a location that you did not look. It's heartbreaking to feel the would-haves, the should-haves, and the regret. The past is a bell that cannot be unrung and cannot be changed. All we can do is forge ahead and attempt to mitigate the potential regretful situations. I'm Kevin Donaldson, always here with Mike Felice, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's what we do here, and that's the stories that we highlight. So do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content, and now you can join. And of course, follow us on all social media so you can find out what we're up to. Tonight is an episode that has been on my mind for a while, and it is birthed out of conversations that Bobby Crudele and I have had on numerous occasions. Bobby and I communicate on many different things, on many different levels, but I think this is the thing that we share mutually. And tonight we're going to talk about the suffering of guilt. Thank you so much for coming in, Bob. You're always a pleasure to have.
Thanks for having me.
Break my balls every time you come in here.
Never.
You know? Never. But tonight we're going to get into it, what guilt is and what we are guilty about. Before we get into anything, let's throw a big shout out to our marquee sponsor, that's Toyota of Hackensack. Now, we don't trust anybody as podcasters, and we certainly don't trust anybody as retired police officers, but we do trust the guys over at Toyota Hackensack. So if you're looking for a car, go to toyotahackensack.com and tell them the Suffering Podcast sent you. So, Bobby, social media question. You know the drill. When it comes to beliefs and principles, how far are you willing to go to uphold them? This is written by Sylvia24. So when you have those things that I'm not talking about the things that you just like or you gravitate towards, your real hardcore beliefs and principles. Have you ever thought about how far you're willing to go to keep them?
It's actually a great question, because I think in the phases of life that can be answered several different ways, right? So I got to answer it now in the present, because maybe the person over 5 years ago didn't give a fuck about my principles.
They shift.
So boom, now it's everything. I'll see it all the way to the end, because I have conviction in what I believe in now. I'm more secure, I think, in what my principles are and where I'm constantly growing in that respect. But I'd say at this point in my life, they're not going to waver. I don't have any wiggle room.
I've seen the difference between something that you believe strong, like a strong opinion, and I've also seen the difference of your belief. Because a strong opinion presented with the proper evidence, you are willing to say, you know what, you got a point, which takes a lot of mental maturity in order to do that, right? You have to be able to say, hey, listen, they got a point. I'm going to listen to that. But I've also seen you on the other side when this is the way that it is, and this is what I believe. Those are a little bit tougher to sway, but that's why I ask you. That's why I bring certain problems to you, because I know where your opinions and your beliefs differ and lie, and I know you're going to give me the real answer. So, but what do you think, if I could ask you this question? This isn't part of the social media question. What is one principle or belief that you just hold strong to?
I want to say everything starts with, as principles go, everything starts with honesty. First being honest with yourself, right? And then being honest.
Hardest person to be honest with.
Hardest person to be honest with. So I said that maybe my metamorphosis has been to be really honest. I wasn't always honest. I was a liar, you know what I mean? At times, to myself, always. Like, I would lie to myself. I'd play games with myself, because, I talk to myself all the time. So,
If you've ever heard the rants of Crudele, you can attest to that. But with that voice that you have in your head, you can pretty much talk yourself into anything.
Oh, yeah. And I think that honesty comes, the second part of that will be with me is consistency. Consistency as a principle of, you do things a certain way. You know, when you get into a routine and you do things a certain way, then there's structure. You know what I mean? I think that I never had any of that. So this is actually like it took me forever to get to where I am now. So I'm like a brand new person, you know, in that respect.
My beliefs and principles have changed in the last 9 months. Here's the one thing that I believe in. When I believe in something strong enough, and let's say it's in relation to you, I have to be willing to lose you as a friend and withhold those principles and beliefs. I have to be willing to do that because I wasn't willing to do that, and I should have.
I understand.
And that's going to, segue a little bit into what we're going to talk about tonight. I have to be willing to give up something that I hold dear and treasure in order to hold my beliefs. That's how I know it's true.
Well, you made a great point, and we've discussed this before. Would you do anything different if we're talking about that particular topic that we'll get to after? And you asked me directly, and I don't know if it was in here or it was on the street. We were just talking, and I have a certain way that I do things, right? I have to do them that way because that's what keeps me in my little wherever I'm at. You know, I got to stay in that box, and I wasn't willing to come out of the box. You know, I had to do it this way, and then after I thought about it, I said, you know, I should have did things differently, and that's what this is all about. Guilt.
And if there's one, like I just did this with a friend of mine, and it was after Mike's death. I just did it with a friend of mine. He was hitting the bottle kind of hard, and his kids were noticing, and his wife, and it wasn't even a direct conversation. His wife had talked to my wife, and I went right at him, and I said, dude, what are you doing? Because I had to be unafraid to lose this man as a friend. And I've known this guy for a long time, to say, what are you doing? Dude, dial it down.
Yeah.
You got it. Like, your kids are noticing, man. Other people are noticing. It's time. And him and in Hall, and I'm like, you know what the fuck just happened to me, right? You know what happened to me and my group of friends. You know that. And I don't care if you never talk to me again. I don't care if you're pissed off at me, as long as you're alive to be pissed off at me. That's all I care about. And believe it or not, I actually lost the guy as a friend.
It happens that way. I just, now that we're on it, sort of these conversations always take a direction. I want to say he was a friend, acquaintance, but he was very close to my father-in-law. He worked with him. He bartended the Nights of Columbus. I used to play darts with him at the back streets. Mike knew him really well. Chris Brannigan. He just passed away the other day, 47 years old. So just sad, just alcohol. And I remember about like 3 years ago, 3 years ago, he came to me because my father was like, talk to Bobby. You know, Bobby's good to talk to about this stuff. You know, he doesn't make it seem like it's the end of the world, you know? So we talked about it, and I could see right away that in his eyes, that he had no backup plan. This was it for him. Like, there was nothing to get sober for. I think there was a part of him that wanted to, you know, but then there was another side that, well, what am I getting sober for here? The biggest thing in my life was my dog, and the dog's dead. And I'm not in a relationship. I don't know what his family situation was, but he lived at the bar, you know, he was at the bar. He was that's what he did. He was a union carpenter. I mean, the guy had a lot of skills. He worked with they just piecework together. It was just like, it consumed him because he didn't have anything, where, like, you know, people like us, our higher powers is something else, right?
But you watch people build themselves around the alcohol specifically. You know, you watch people build their lives around it.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound very weird. I was watching this thing today on YouTube, and it was, you know who Johnny Ringo was? Johnny from Tombstone.
Tombstone, yeah.
So it was about the Johnny Ringo's final resting place, and they get into a little bit of it. And they say Johnny Ringo was a drunk, right? And he would just go to the bar and get liquor, and he'd steal a bunch of liquor, and he'd go and that was all his thing. But the guy said something particularly. He goes, you got to think about the world that Johnny Ringo lived in. It was a violent world. There was nothing there. It wasn't like he was going to find a wife and find a living. This is all he had. And God, and I'm thinking about this. I'm like, wow, what a depressing life. That's got to be a horrible life that, you know, you don't see any end to it.
Well, that's just, wow, Johnny Ringo, you look like someone just walked over your grave. But this guy, I gave him that same type of answer. Like, listen, it has to come from you. You know, I can't do anything for you until it has to come. Once it comes from you and you're ready, I'll be all in. I'll help you. But you could just see, you know what I mean? But he just drank himself to death. You know, it was one of those things. It's sad. It's sad. And it's like, you know, in that case, I feel like, you know, he was at my house for barbecues. He's a really nice guy, but I really couldn't have done anything for him.
So to segue into tonight's topic about guilt. Now, let's pretend that you didn't have that difficult conversation with this gentleman. All right. You held back. He's, I don't want to. He's not ready. It's a waste of breath. And the inevitable happens where he passed away, which he ended up doing anyway. Say you didn't have that conversation with him. What would that have done to you personally?
You know, you got to be honest with yourself. I'd be like, man, I should have went out of my way. You know, because how hard is it to go to somebody and say, hey, listen, you might not be ready for this, but I'm going to say it anyway. You know, you ease your way into the conversation. You're not going to, it's not like we had this type of relationship like it was you, where I could go, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Or really like be aggressive or pick my spots. You know who your audience is. I didn't have that relationship with him. I knew who he was, but I could have if it was that scenario, I would have felt like I should have did something. You know, but it didn't end up. I did. And I gave him the true story, you know, and I just was like, it's not the end of the world. I tell people all the time, you think life's over because you can't go to the bar and have a drink?
No, that's when life begins. Because you realize how much time you wasted.
They don't understand that. It's because, you know, it's got a grip on you, you know?
You realize, you know, when you're away from that stuff, you realize how much time that consumed.
That's why I'm a big advocate of rehabilitation, because if you go to rehab and you're off it for a significant month, your body has time to recharge. You get to see things in a more clarity. You know, you start looking at things differently. You're lucid. I became lucid quickly, you know, and I was like, wow, look what I've done. You know, I started looking at it like that. Then to talk about guilt, then I spent in rehab. I was doing the best I could to get somewhere, but I had a lot of guilt. Then all these things that I was hiding came out in rehab, you know?
The funny thing about you, and I'd love to see the statistic on this, is how many people survive and stay sober versus, and I'm not talking, I guess to some extent, dry drunk, where they're forced into rehab. They get into an accident, they get whatever. You know,
they got to do it.
They got to do it. Versus people like yourself, and I did the same thing. I checked myself in. Like, I knew there was a problem. I checked myself in. I did it clear, clean, sober. How many guys did you see get wheeled into rehab that were so drunk that it just bled out of them for a couple of days?
There was a bunch.
Yeah.
I mean, and don't forget, I was at the rehab with all the drug addicts too. So it was just like one disaster zone after another. You know, it's just your drug of choice, right?
Your level of success has got to be tenfold if you willingly go in there. But how many people have the clarity to do that?
Yeah. You know, it all comes together, you know, on that respect.
So guilt. I want to know what you believe your definition, and I didn't look this up in Webster's or anything, but I'd love to know what your particular definition of guilt is.
It's the first level of regret.
I think it's something in your moral compass that says, I didn't do that right.
And there's all different types of guilt. So, you know, you could be talking about something you didn't do, or you could be talking about something you did, you know, or a behavior. Or guilt, there's so many different, you know.
I think it's not, I believe everybody has a moral compass, whether that compass is out of calibration or whatever it may be. But I believe everybody has a moral compass. And I believe when you veer off from that moral compass is when it happens, either in one direction, which makes you do something, or another direction, which makes you not do something. Listen, I'm guilty about a million things in my life. My behaviors, the way I acted, the way I reacted, what I did do, what I didn't do. I should have done this. I should have done that. And it's because my gut, my moral compass is telling me to go a certain way, and I just didn't listen to it. Because if you truly believe, even if it's wrong, like if you truly believe this is the way you, like your brand of talking to somebody about getting sober, or your brand of how you dealt with loss. I've heard this. It's like he's dead. There's nothing he can do. You did the rant about it the other day. Your moral compass is clear because you followed the path that you want to do. Now, with sober eyes, it's a little bit different. You might look back and...
Well, it's the path that brought you here, right? So the path that brought you here, you know, you have to question that too sometimes, you know, even though the path, what use was the rule of how you got to where you are? What good was it? A good rule? Did you need to change something in there? You know, and there's been times, you know, I've had a lot of guilt about the way, you know, I say whatever the fuck I want to say, you know, like, and I do. And sometimes I say it for other people's benefits. in the sense that if you're my friend and you have a problem with somebody and I don't really know that person, but they're telling me a story, I'm like, well, that person's a jerk off, and I'll say some things. When that person could be the best person in the world, they're just having an issue with this particular person who I know. So that's a bad. And then maybe it comes back on you. Oh, dude, why would you say that about that person? It's like, oh, because I was backing up my friend, but really that was wrong. Like it's that type of stuff that, now I very cognizant of that, like, hey, listen, I like to say what I like to say. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's just spontaneous. It just comes out,
Is that like whiny little bitches?
I don't know, whiny little bitches. I don't. Where did that even come from?
I don't know, but it's a great line.
It is a great line. I mean, but there are a lot of whiny little bitches out there. When you talk about some of the stuff these people complain about, I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's just like, yo, grow up. Stop with the bullshit.
This is an on-air rant. I love it.
No, seriously, it's just it's like, but that's where whiny. That's what I mean by whiny little bitches. If you have an important reason for whining, I'll listen to you. You know what I mean? I care. I do care. I just don't care about the bullshit.
So there's different levels of guilt. Right?
Yes.
There's many, many different levels of guilt. There's those things that you're guilty about that you can go back and change. You learned that in rehab, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go make amends.
Yeah.
And then there's things that you can't change. There's things that you can't unring certain bells. All right. With you and your rehab journey, I'm sure you had a lot of guilt on the time lost with your family, the time lost with your wife. You're able to repair that, but you're still fighting against the shadows of the past. How long did it take for you particularly to overcome the things that you tried to amend because of that guilt within your own household?
I kind of wiped everything out, You
came back and it was.
Listen, I've said this before on this show, and I'll say it again. I was prepared to lose everything because I deserved to lose everything, and I really did. So I bought into my mindset, going in. Okay, there's a chance I'm going to come home to nothing. I'm going to have to get my own place. I'm going to go. Maybe this is the cam. Even though it was wearing. It was all wearing. It was just snowballing, that evolution of like who I was becoming. Now, did I know that I'd have full support from my family and that they wanted me where I was? Yes, absolutely. And it takes a lot of courage to do that and get out of your routine and get out of everything, not knowing it was never about what people thought about me. People have said far worse and thought way worse of me through my years of party years than anything else. So I didn't really care about that. It was about my family. So totally about my inner circle there. And I knew that I might lose them, but I wouldn't lose their support. I'd still be dad. I'd still be that guy. I just wouldn't be there in the house anymore. That was a big issue for me because I was prepared to lose it, but that's the last thing I wanted because I just have this connection. You know what I mean?
It's that proverbial letting go.
Yeah,
you hear that all the time.
I'm a failure now. Like I'm a better failure because listen, I got to live no matter what. So I got to live. I'm not going to rehab because I have to go. I'm going because I want to go because I want to live. I'm choosing life. All right. And I was choosing life, but life may never be the same when you come back out. You might not be at home anymore, but I'm still going to be the best father I could be. And that was the main objective there. My higher power was them because they didn't deserve that. Listen, you and your wife, there's certain things she didn't deserve. You know what I mean? And I'm saying me when I say you, but
it's very true with my wife as well.
But at the same time, we're adults and we entered into it. You know what I mean? And it is what it is. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But the kids, they didn't have to choose. Yeah. They don't get to choose, your father and your mother. You know what I mean? And so my main objective is okay, there's my reason and the reason to stay. And yeah, so I was prepared to, hey, listen, if I'm off-site, that's what I call not being in the house, off-site, I'm going to be the best father, better than I was when I was on-site. I had that mindset coming in. Fortunately for me, it worked out when I came back, and it was a trial, but everybody saw the difference. And it built into something better and better,
When your wife looked at you for the first time with you having sober eyes and a sober face and everything and waiting for... Is your wife Italian?
She's a mix of a bunch of shit.
Because if she's Italian, she's always waiting for the shoe to drop. You know, that's my wife.
She's Irish, she's Dutch, she's German, she's a lot of different things. People think she's Argentine, and I just say, yeah, she's from Argentina.
She's related to Evita. But my wife is always waiting for the shoe to drop. And that's the constant battle. Like when you have that type of guilt and you go back into a situation, even though you've changed, you're a different Bobby Crudele, I'm a different Kevin Donaldson, you go back in there and you're constantly trying to prove, yes, I am a better person. You slip up. You know, I'm not talking about with alcohol. You slip up with behavior. That notwithstanding, it's hard to overcome that stuff, but you feel that guilt inside and you're constantly trying to make amends. You know, it's one of the 12 steps. And we just had this conversation the other day. I'm not a big 12-step guy, or I wasn't when I was going through rehab.
Mm-hmm.
I am now, but not the way they do it. Okay?
Not me neither.
The way they do it is way too quick.
Yeah, it's like a easy pass.
Yeah.
You know, so.
But it takes years and years and years.
And listen, I don't want to put down AA. Listen, it's there for a reason. A lot of people gain from it, you know, and they stay sober to get their life back together. It's just not my, you know, it helped me in the beginning a lot. It really did. I don't want to say I advanced past it. I just went in a different direction for me. You know, I have certain beliefs that don't line up with AA.
But guilt can be a powerful thing too, you know. Guilt you can use guilt as fuel.
You can use guilt as a fuel, yeah.
So I use guilt as a fuel because I remember what I was like back then.
Mm-hmm.
I remember all those things I did wrong. And that sort of, if I stayed sober for nothing else, I could stay sober for the guilt that I feel alone. I can't go back to that. I was a bad person. I was doing all this bad stuff. I wasn't who I want to be. So there's many other reasons. But if that was the only reason, I think guilt would be enough to keep me on the straight and narrow.
I think for me, and this might sound a little fucked up, but then it is me, so it might sound normal for me. If I care about you, you know, if I care about you, I'll have guilt. If I don't care about you, or you're just some person.
That's a good point.
I won't have guilt. I'll just feel bad for my behavior. But there's no guilt. Guilt, that's the difference with feeling bad about your behavior. You dismiss it, you know? Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Can't change it. Can't change the past. Everyone's, you know, you can't go back. There's no time fucking machine, you know? The DeLorean ain't pulling up. We're not going. So I actually, like, and some people might take offense to that or think that's cold, or maybe it's even like, that sort of sounds sociopathic in a sense. Like, I don't care. If I don't care about you, then I don't care what I did to you. And there's plenty of that going around. I mean, we're talking the Wild Wild West with me. I mean, I'm Johnny Ringo and Doc Holliday all wrapped up into one. So, but if I cared about you, there's a lot of people that I wasn't necessarily friends with, but for some reason or another, I cared about them. And those are the people that I'm generally sorry if I mistreated them, or I acted, or I said something. You know, I really am, because there's some moral compass there, moral turpitude that I have, that, you know, because I know the difference between wrong and right. I mean, you know, I'm not trying to hide that, but I'm also not trying to sound like this angel person who's like, listen, if I didn't like you, I didn't like you. There might have been a reason I was acting like that. And, you know, I thought you were a scumbag, and I'm sure you thought I was a scumbag. So let's just leave it at that, because I have only so many sorries left in the bag. You know what I'm saying?
Well, let's go with your famous line, right? Your famous line that you end every audio message that you send me.
You get to say it?
Yeah, of course. It's, hey, suck a dick.
Yeah,
you know?
Christy Howard wouldn't let me say that.
Oh, I prepped her. So Bobby was just on Drop the Mask with Christy Howard. Hopefully it'll air by the time this comes out.
She's like, I'm a female. I'm like, so?
So I tell her, I said, just so you know, you might get a suck a dick at the end of it. But let's just say.
It's my endearing way of saying goodbye. And seriously, I mean, it's, okay.
That's your language.
In general, it's my language. Someone said it to me the other day. They said, oh, Kevin's so right about you. It's your language. I think Corey, my buddy Corey, Kevin's so right about you. That's your love language.
It is your love language.
I said, listen, for most people in this world, if I say, yeah, suck a dick, it's offensive to, you know, a large percentage of people. And they'll be like, what? And I'll be like, no, that's like me saying goodbye, you know?
But you may feel, so say you said it to a 90-year-old woman, hey, suck a dick.
And she was like, hey, come on. I was like, yo, I like older women. What are you talking about?
Let me take my teeth out. When you say that to me, there is...
Don't get me started with the old people.
When you say that to me, I know exactly what it is. Like, I have accepted it. I know exactly what it is coming from you. But somebody who you don't have that relationship, say a 90-year-old woman, you tell them to suck a dick, you may feel guilty about that. But you're saying the same thing to me in the same manner. The key component to any law enforcement officer being the best version of themselves is through education. Sherry Alsop is a leader in providing that education to police agencies, preparing them for the all too frequent dealings with sexual assault victims.
You've seen Sherry on episode 169 of the Suffering Podcast. She survived incest and almost daily sexual assault, so she comes from a place of experience and true understanding.
Sherry has the intelligence, commitment, and compassion to open the eyes of those on the front lines, while providing the tools to effectively deal with a difficult situation. Sherry's instruction comes from experience and multiple certifications.
Training with Sherry will offer on-site training, customized schedules, specialized instruction tailored from a victim's perspective.
You are going to hear Sherry's heart-wrenching but inspiring survivor story. Learn proprietary trauma-informed training techniques. Uncovered victim-centered interview methods while earning continuing education credits according to your state guidelines. To be the best, you must learn from the best. Let Sherry also guide you through the delicate cases of sexual assault from a victim's point of view.
Be a source of comfort to those victims affected by these traumatic experiences while producing a solid investigation and uncovering details that often go unnoticed.
To find out more or to contact Sherry Alsop, go to sherryalsop.com. That's SherryAlsop.com.
I don't say it to, like, just every Tom, Dick, and Harry that's going down the street, and then it would be in a different context. It would be like, if I'm having a conversation on the street and it's at that level and I say, suck my dick, it's probably because, you're going to get fucking face planted. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just the way it's going. I probably wouldn't say suck a dick. I'd probably say something else.
I want one day for that to be your calling card, where you're walking down the street and everybody's like, hey, Bobby, suck a dick.
Yo, what's up? Like that guy, Little Mo, the guy, hey, how you doing? That guy, that's all he says. And then everybody does the same thing. The guy's probably a multimillionaire now.
Now, there was an event that happened. You and I both got hit hard with, May 9th, 2024, when Mike Fillais took his life. We've spoken about this many times on the show, but there's a guilt that we both feel. And I think it's because our moral compass set us in place and told us what we should have been doing. And I don't think either of us feel that we did what we were supposed to do. And we have that guilt inside of us.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
And regardless of whatever we've made up in our head that we could have done, we both talk, I don't think it would have changed anything, but we didn't try. So how do we know? So that's something that you and I live with. We still discuss it constantly. It's coming up on a year. We're 10 months removed from it. So, let's talk about some of the things that we talked about doing for him. I mean, you and I, with him here, sat down and talked about sobriety. It was a suffering of sobriety.
Yeah, it was purposely for him. I mean, obviously he wasn't in on it, but I think it hit a nerve here and there.
You and I sat down we talked on the phone privately. Like, hey, this guy needs help. If we come at him head first, it's not going to work. It's not going to land. Let's try to do it backhandedly. So if you go back and listen to The Suffering of Sobriety, which is like 177, 78, somewhere around there, it was right before.
It's not 169?
No, that was Sherry Alsop.
Ooh.
I know that off the top of my head. If you listen to that, those were all the things, the should-haves that we were talking about, that we should do this, we should do this, we should do this. As late as the week of, you, myself, Tom, and Mike DePalma were planning on going over his house. And DePalma I think he was very serious that we were going to kick the shit out of him until he goes.
Well, he wanted to beat him down.
Yeah.
But, so go back to the personalities we're dealing with here. You're a business, he's your friend on top of being your business partners, right? Different relationship in a sense. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot more going on. There's a lot of responsibility that comes into this. People just think we're here dropping the F-bomb. They don't understand the work that you put into this, where it all comes from. So there's a lot of responsibility there. So there are some issues, right? And you were talking to me about that. My issues were I coach hard. I coach hard. I coach hard. That's not just the football terminology. I coach hard in life. I coach I father hard. I'm not like, an asshole. I don't like, I'm just saying I'm hard. So Mike knew exactly who he was dealing with. But what Mike was great at is manipulating. Mike could manipulate anything and do it very subtly. So I'm acting like this guy, because it was Rover. When we were in grammar school, Mike was the tough guy. Mike was the guy that fucking protected me. You know what I mean? Then as we got older, I became the fucking like, yeah, you don't want to fuck, you know what I mean? Like shit like that. And it was like, but we were still together in it. So he used my own attitude against me to make me stay at bay. Like he knew how to do it. And he was a master at it. And I didn't realize that until after it was gone.
So one of the things I'm most guilty about is we had multiple conversations. You'd watch the Instagram live and he would be messed up and I would get a call from you. When I got home, you knew about the time I'd stop recording or on the way home. It's like, dude, you got to get him off the show. You got to get him off the show. Do you remember those conversations?
Yeah, because I just, but I think the downside of that was when I said, we can't get him off the show because if we get him off the show, that'll be the end of him. This is all he has. So I always thought the show would
straighten him out.
I thought the show would navigate him to a better spot. He just needed time. Well, he needed time.
The part of that is, and I've said this multiple times, I buy into this stuff. Like what I talk about, I believe. I'll stick my head up my ass in order to get better. If you told me that was the path, Mike talked a lot about it, but never did it.
Lip service.
He did. I sat in a harmonic egg. I did Reiki. I did all these funky things on a path to healing. Mike talked about it and always said, yeah, I'll do it. But like you said, it was a manipulation. Yeah, I'll do it. And it was kind of to shut me up. But we had those conversations where he said, you got to get him off the show. And I said to you very clearly, I said, I don't have the guts to do it because I was afraid of the consequences.
And I don't think it was more like me wanting you to get him off the show. I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea here. I didn't want him off the show. I wanted you to tell him you're going to be off the show if you don't straighten it out. And because I was like, I saw the writing on the wall. Listen, I never in a million years thought he would do suicide. I to this day, I didn't see any of that. I saw someone going down a rabbit hole big time, but I just figured it was going to be him drinking himself to death, whatever.
Crash, DUI.
Yeah, something. I never thought he would take his own life. Okay, so that was the shock, and it's still a shock to today. I just said it on my thing. I still in shock. I still feel the same way I did when she called me and she was at the house and said, I hear her voice. Every time I think of him, I hear her voice. He's dead. Mike's dead. And I was like, fucking, but that's my punishment for not doing what I should have done, and that's where that's guilt. That's guilt in its highest form.
And it's the guilt that can never be changed. But you're right. So when you said that to me, and I knew exactly what you meant, listen, the chair would always have been here for him, even if he went away.
Chair's his chair.
It would always be.
I mean, he needed to go to fucking rehab, He needed to do that.
He needed to do that to find some clarity because I don't think the guy ever lived a day without alcohol the last 4 or 5 years.
Easy, maybe longer.
Yeah. So, but you were right. And I knew you were. So here's the fucked up thing. I knew you were right. I 100% knew you had it nailed on the head. But I said to you, I can't do that because I don't have the balls to do it. Because I knew if I did, I was afraid anyway. I was afraid that I was going to A, lose him as a friend, B, watch his life totally implode now. And then I would feel even worse guilt for doing that.
And who do you go to? So here's another aspect. There's no one else to go to. You're not going to go outside of the circle because this is what happens when you do that. Now it takes on a new life and a new thing and more things create more people involved. There's so many cooks in the stew. So it's not like, I wasn't reaching out to anybody. Like I wasn't going to go call someone and go, Mike's not doing it. I don't know what to do. That wasn't going to help the situation. I know because I've seen this happen before where people you get other people involved and no matter who it is, and it just takes a turn for the worse. It had to stay in-house. It just...
Do you think there was anybody that could have gotten through? Maybe his father?
Mm-mm. His mother.
His mother? Yeah, well.
But obviously, unfortunately, she's gone. But if you know what? I mean, everybody would have a different, you know what I mean? Different opinion. I'm sure his brother, Frank would have a different opinion about maybe who could have. And I respect all that. me personally, for knowing him and knowing how he is and everything, I think the only person that maybe could have gotten through to him was his mother. I think if his mother was still alive, he'd still be alive. I think that would have been something to live for. And I'm not saying he didn't love his father. He loved his father. He loved his brother. I mean, he just, went so far down the rabbit hole that the blue pill, the red pill, nothing was saving him. You know what I mean? It was unfortunate, and I like to say I wouldn't be out. Like, I think that's something we both do. It probably wouldn't have changed anything, but it would have been good if we tried, if we did something or if we were more aggressive. But, maybe it would have. You ever think of that side? That's even makes it fucking worse. That makes your guilt multiply when you think like that, because I'm a very persuasive person. I could get results when I help people a lot of times. And we're talking about, like, as far as friends go, he was the friend. And I ignored and just figured, Mike will be Mike. Mike will get over it. Mike, something good will happen for him, something good in his life, because he didn't have a whole lot of good. This is the only good. And I think I don't want to sound condescending, but it kind of lost his allure for this thing. This was important to him, but I think it started to level out as his personal problems and his personal decisions started making him
I feel like
go in a different direction.
But I feel like and this is another part of the guilt, is I feel like I had a part in that. I really do, because I said to Mike from the very beginning, listen, you and I together here, this is important, but you separately is important. Just like me separately is important. We did that with our police careers. We put everything into our police careers, and we went to work one day and we never went back. And that was it. And now all of a sudden you're left out in the open and you don't know what to do. And that is a horrible, horrible place to sit. And I knew one day this show is it's going to end. And I didn't want him to be in that situation. So I would push him here and push him there to do this stuff, to brand himself.
He didn't want that.
He didn't want any of that.
He was happy just to be here. Mike is very simplistic, and we've said this a dozen times. He's a creature of routine, same things. That's why I saw him every day of my life. He was always trying to call. It was the same thing over and over and over. It's like Groundhog Day.
But when I started going out and doing other shows, I know it weighed on him. I know it did, because I know he spoke to people about it, and
he spoke to me about it, and I was like, what do you want the guy to see? Sometimes I'm not the best person to, like, So you go along with your friends. Like, if you're calling me and you're telling me something and you're going to vent to me, I'm going to listen to you. If you ask me for my opinion now, it might not be something you want to hear, because I'm going to give you a different perspective where my vantage point is.
But that's exactly why somebody like me comes to you and asks for your opinion. It's exactly why, because I know for a fact that you're not going to sugarcoat it. You're not going to say it with a smile. You're going to hit me hard with it, and that's what I want. I like that stuff. That's me. But not everybody likes that stuff. But and I was doing these things because I never want to put my eggs all in one basket. So I feel guilty about that. Right? But here's the turnaround on all this. Here's how I alleviate my guilt. The lessons that I learned from the things that I didn't do with Mike are things that I put into play in my life now. Okay? So guilt is only as good as what you do with it. You can sit here and be in your own little pity party. We could sit here and have a pity party. Oh, I miss Mike. I miss Mike. We can have that all day long. But what are you going to do with that? And that's where the guilt becomes the fuel. Mm-hmm. And now I approach life a lot different. If I have a conflict, Mike and I had conflict at the end. We really did have a lot of conflict. I don't let conflict sit. If I got a conflict with you, I got a problem with you, guess what? Hey, Bob, I got a problem. Let's talk. Mm-hmm. And then we get it out in the open. By the end of the conversation, it's either we may yell, we may scream. Hey, listen, we may get into a fight. It's fine. But
you always got Flynn to help you out if that happens.
I just throw them at you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I have to be willing to approach you with that conflict and be unafraid. Otherwise, it's just going to sit there and fester, because I think that's what it did with him.
How's this perspective, a different perspective for you? What if he never killed himself? And what if he just wasn't on the show anymore and he went down to, he just didn't, became, his alcoholism became worse, and he just sort of separated himself, and he was out there doing whatever, working for the school or whatever he's doing, but he just didn't. Would you have the guilt?
Yeah.
You would?
I would.
See, here's where I separate. See, I'm honest I talk to him, right? So I will be like, because when he came to me and he told me that, well, Kevin goes to these shows and does this and that. And, I'm like, what the fuck you talking about? I said, he gives you every opportunity to do that shit. And he just looked at me like, I said, you don't think I know? I'm involved. I said, of course. I said, you're being jealous. He's doing all the work. You just want to ride in and get it, or do you want to do the work too? You can't do half the work and expect the same results, right? I mean, he knows this. It's just my whole thing on it with him is just to retract is when he stopped becoming a cop, that part, he, like where you took it and you ran with it and used it and to do better things, his part died. So he was less of a person, and he felt like less of a person because he wasn't a cop anymore. And that's what he did better than anything. He was the cop. You know what I mean? When cops, as far as cops go, he was the fucking cop. So I think that's when he didn't have that, that's when everything else, all those other things choked him.
Here's a quick question for you. If you were able to, you had many conversations with him, and I did as well. What do you think Mike was guilty about?
Mike was a tough guy. Like, he was tough. He had a lot of conviction, and he was angry. He was really angry. And
I would watch him get worked up on stuff, like worked up.
Yeah, and he used to say things to me that, and I would just sort of see when someone's like that, you can't meet their anger with your anger, because I had nothing to be angry about. I'm just listening. But at times I would just say, I would hit him with a, hey, listen, I understand what you're talking about, and I understand that 100%. I'm with you. I got your back regardless of whatever. But we always talk about accountability. I said, everything's about accountability. I said, I'm one of the biggest fuck ups in the world. And I said, but I got to be accountable for that. I got to own my shit. I said, sometimes I think you're not owning it. I think you just like, fuck this. This happened to me. Why is this? Why is it like this? You're a part of this. So you can't be part of something and have no blame, And I'm not like trying to say anything bad about him right now. I'm saying that everybody has that. If me and my wife split up, all right, it's not all like under normal circumstances. I'm talking normal circumstances, irreconcilable, whatever it is. There's blame on both sides there. We just couldn't, we just decided to go the other way, right? His thing is a little more going on there. I don't know. That's his private business. I would never put that out over the air or whatever, but whatever that was, he had to take some blame for it, and I feel like he never really did. I felt like he was in denial about a lot of things, and I think if he had remained on a police force and he continued to work as a cop and he never killed that guy and he didn't anything and he'd still be there now today. He wouldn't have left. He'd be a 30-year guy or more, and things would have been differently for him. He would have been able to open up to certain things. I think because he didn't have the cop thing anymore. Couldn't work out like he used to work out. He
fucked up his neck.
Fucked up his neck, did the dumb surgery, did this, did that, whatever. And I told him not to get the goddamn surgery, and he got it anyway.
Damn near killed him.
And those things, so you see the pattern of things, the way they went down, it just depleted him. So talk about feeling defeated. That's been a word that's been going around lately. I've been talking to people everywhere. I feel defeated. He felt defeated on multiple platforms.
I had a conversation with him. I don't ever think I said this. I had a conversation with him while he was in the hospital for his first neck surgery. And he was in such pain, and he was just dejected, and maybe it was the second one, maybe because the clot had formed and everything. And I remember him saying to me, and you could tell he was crying, but it could have been a little bit of detox too. Okay, you've seen people go in detox; they start crying because the pain's so bad. So I'm not quite sure, but here's exactly what he said to me. He goes, "If I could find a window to jump out, I'd jump out." And he said it with tears in his eyes. And I said, "Mike, I'm coming over. I'm coming to He was at Hackensack Medical. I said, "I'm coming to Hackensack Medical right now. I'll sit with you. We'll get through this." And he's no, and he kept talking to me, and we talked for probably a half hour, 45 minutes. And by the time we got done, I felt like he was in a better place. I think so. Those suicidal thoughts that he had were there for a while, but I think Mike was guilty about taking that guy's life. I know for a fact he didn't want to do it. I know it was part of his job, but I always think that that changed him, that made him a different person. And what it did for him is it put this, because everything got taken away.
That's your moral compass, okay? So as a cop, we all have different moral compass. I know plenty of cops who have taken people's lives and they just, hey, listen, it's part of the job. It ends there. I'm sure there's something in there that fucks them up a little bit here or there, but they're like this with it. It's like, hey, listen, it happened. You know what I mean? I had to do it. I'm going home. I don't think he was like that. I remember
he described it with such clarity.
Well, we were at his house one night, and I came over, watched a hockey game with him. He was a Devils fan. I fucking hated the Devils. And me, him, his brother-in-law. So anyway, he told me, like, afterwards, this is when I was still drinking, I think, at the time. He's like, I can't sleep. He goes, I just wake up, I'm soaking wet. I'm just soaking wet. I really feel he felt so alone. I mean, he really felt like he was, and I don't think he ever felt alone in his life. You know, I think he always had something or someone or something to go do that made him feel like he had purpose, right? So after that, and then coming off the job, the purpose is gone. You know what I mean? Whenever you're being held up here, and now you're just like everybody else.
But that put that big giant hole, that guilt that he felt, put that big giant hole that he could never fill. So what'd he do? He put himself back into a routine, but his routine was bar, going here, going there, and that was his routine. And then there was other things that he was doing in his life that weren't very good for him. And it was a hole that could never be filled. You know, you see these guys on the police department, right? You can identify these people. They got a hole inside of them. So here's what they do. I'm going to go, I'm going to get a job that's going to fill that hole. They have holes in them before the job. That's going to fill it. And when they find out it doesn't fill that hole, all right, I'm going to get a girlfriend. All right, let me get a girlfriend that doesn't fill the hole. Then I'm going to get promoted. Well, that doesn't work. It doesn't fill the hole. So then they get a second girlfriend. And it's just an ongoing thing because they never find that thing to fill the hole. Mike, as a cop, he was whole. That's what he felt made him whole. But after he took that guy's life, and totally justified and everything like that, and he did his job, it still doesn't matter. He said that to me many times. He goes, but I saw his head open up. He was able to recall that with such clarity.
I think when the Attorney General came back and said, yeah, it was your bullet that killed him, I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back as far as that's concerned. Then it's like pile on the rabbit. There's a lot of things, and a lot of things, probably that's on him. You know what I mean? That was his life. He chose that, just like, listen, when I was drinking and I was out there fucking doing my thing, there was a dozen times I could have been kicked out of the house, or could have been, just get the fuck out, or I could have left or whatever. You know what I mean? But I never did. I always had that connection to the household. I always something was keeping me. You know what I mean? Even though in my mind I wasn't really there. I think for him, it would have been better if I think he had the same mindset, but I think it would have been better if he just left early. I think if I had to go back and say that, you know what I mean? I just think that, like, knowing what I know, I think it would have been better if he had just said, listen, let's just do it this way,
So with this guilt that you have over this and many other things in your life, how do you use that as fuel for the current Bobby Crudele? Because I got to be honest with you, in the last 10 years, I've watched you grow. I've watched you change. I know this is going to ruin your reputation, buddy, but I've watched you grow. I've watched you change. I watch you change on how you interact with people, on especially the people who you care about, like you said. So what do you think is a way that this guilt that you have inside of you, you've used it for better purposes rather than just sit and wallow in your self-pity?
I would start off with suck a dick because you're an asshole. Don't believe this guy, people. No. My guilt in general has made me stronger, because I realized that, you can't fix everything, but you can learn from the things that made you guilty and you can improve yourself. So we always say we're trying to be the best version of ourselves, right? So I really am trying to be the best version of myself. It's a work in progress. Every fucking day, every minute, it's something. It is. And I'm always thinking. If I was going to be true to myself, you get 15 videos a day. It would be insane. But then I wouldn't have any time to do anything else. It'd just be me going, So, but I think as it pertains to Mike, you know, that would be the most guilt I've ever felt, you know, because I got past all that other stuff. You know, something bad happens. I do something bad. I wasn't a good person. I treated somebody wrong, or something just happened to me, you know, because of a decision I made that really didn't have any, it just happened because of a decision I made. You know, okay, I got to deal with that shit. You know, adversity is like, you know, part of me, you know, so I'll roll past any of that shit. That's called battle tested, right? I'm battle tested. My whole life I've been battle tested. Not everybody has a life like I had. You know, so I'm good with all that. You know, I can deal with anything that happens. Anybody out there has a problem with me, whatever, fucking, I'll deal with all that bullshit. But as it pertains to my involvement with him, I would say my biggest thing I learned is not to be so selfish. Because in my recovery and my mindset, a lot of that's based on selfishness. Selfishness in a good way. You know, selfishness to be closer to my family.
I think that's one of the. So you've said that to me before, but I think you going to rehab is probably one of the most selfless things you've ever done. It's
selfless, but it's selfish because in order to become a different person, you have to commit yourself to that. And the only person that can really help you in that situation is you. You can use other people for strength, but you're not interacting with them. You're not making them part of this journey. You have to get through this first level of it, right? So that's where, you know, it's super selfish, but it's the only time being really selfish is beneficial to everybody else around you, because now you're coming out a new, you know, your objective is I want to be a shiny diamond, you know, so you're going to go and become a polished up but then now you have to consistently do it. You have to maintain it. There's a maintenance level to it, right? So I think that part of trying to understand, you know, the things that I didn't do and where I failed him because of being a selfish person. I was more concerned about, I got to coach. I got to do this. I'm not going to let this guy bring me down. He'll be all right. You know, there was plenty of times I could have done extra and I didn't. And I'm being really honest. So everybody needs to hear this because people do it all the time and it's called excuses, right? I wasn't there for him because I was too caught up in my own life. I got to coach this. I got to go here. I got my job. I got to do this. I got to fucking do this with my family. And I ignored a lot of stuff because I always assumed he would just be there because he was like a fucking rock. It turned out he wasn't a rock. He was a sponge. And he fucking, at the end, he deteriorated. And I didn't notice that because I was too caught up in my own shit. And he was one of my biggest supporters. So that's even the worst part about it. He was my biggest fan. You know, like he was always, I would run into people that'd be like, Mike Felice, you walk on water. You're the greatest thing in the world.
Before I met you, that's every other word. Bobby this, Bobby that. Bobby,
yeah,
Bobby,
I mean, lots of people
yeah.
say, Mike Felice, he's, oh my God, this dude, he loves you like, you know, like a brother. And I go, he is a brother. He's not, my friend Corey always says this thing. I love Corey because he always comes out with these good sayings. And he's like, you're not a friend, you're a brother. You know, he goes, that's the way I look at you. He goes, because I don't have to eat dinner with you. I don't have to see you every waking moment. You don't have to call me. You don't have to text me. It's just, we know we got that relationship, you know? And that's that thing I was talking about. That was him. That was you. Unfortunately, now it's Flynn. I don't know. I don't like leprechauns. They're creepy.
But if Mike came to me one day, he's like, hey, I got something to tell you. Yeah, Bobby and we're like a couple now, like we're fucking. And I would be like, it kind of makes sense.
He would definitely be the man because he would. It's just one of those things. And I'm not ashamed of that. I'd be like, okay, Mike, put it in. Put it in now. I'd suck it. Oh, suck it. No, it's disgusting. What are we talking about here? I hope kids don't watch this fucking thing. This is terrible.
So the difference...
If he put a wig on and he had a pair of fake tits, we'd be down to Chinatown, baby.
Oh, no. Woo! No.
I am consistent in my behavior.
A wig on that. Really?
Why not? He's a handsome guy. He's got that hard look. It's like, hey, what's your name? Yolanda. Okay.
So I think the difference is It's the difference between being the victim or the victor, right?
Mhm.
That's what guilt is.
Yes.
In its essence. So if we were to sit there and wallow in our guilt,
Whiny little bitches.
whiny little bitches, we would be in the same spot that he was in. He sat and took his guilt and just wallowed in it and just sat in it and just like sitting in a bathtub if the water was guilt.
And it came out with just, he wanted to just go out and dive into things that would make him forget about his situation. At some point, it all comes crashing in. You get to, that's called rock bottom. Everyone acts differently when you get to rock bottom. I was there, and obviously he was there.
He could have used, if you substitute the word suffering and guilt, they're pretty much the same. So if he's suffering with this guilt, and if he would have used that as fuel to be victorious, the sky would have been the limit for him. And I'm not lying to you. Like this, I always said, I'll go out and I'll tell the things that happened to me and stuff. Much worse things. He could have used that as fuel to propel him and help somebody else.
Hey, I always thought that he would take this show. Somebody said to me one time, they said, hey, you think because he was on that show and he's dealing with people that are fucked up all the time and it's like he's hearing all this, you think that worked against him? Or I said, no, I think he actually felt like he was helping people. I said, because there's a lot of fucked up people on this show. Let's be honest. It's about suffering, and people who suffer are fucked up. If you can't admit you're fucked up, then you don't belong on this show. So anybody who wants to be on this show, if you're not fucked up, you can't come on.
Get out.
But get out. You're out. But like he was helping people, and I thought this was his saving grace. I really did think that he believed in that, and I think he did believe in it. I just think he just stopped believing in himself. That's a tough thing when that happens, when you just don't believe in yourself anymore and you feel like you're completely defeated. And I think that's where he was. And there was nothing left.
His confidence
maybe
was
just
shot.
for that night, and I think he needed courage and he needed some things to happen for him to do what he did. And I think he was planning it, but I didn't see it. And when just that, I didn't see it. So there's where my guilt is. I didn't see it. How did I miss that? And I missed it because I was too caught up in my own fucking shit. And everybody's too caught up in their own shit.
I always pride myself, and everything I've heard about you as a detective, you were the detective.
I wouldn't say the detective. I was one of them. I worked with some great detectives.
But
I got to give a shout out to a guy. I hope you keep it on the show. Joe Sloan. I never mentioned him before.
I'm cutting that shit out.
I cut it, dude. This guy was fucking the best fucking detective, young detective Klein. He was just awesome. The things that he came up with, like his innovative cameras and stuff to catch burglars, he was really good. And I'm still great friends with him. He's still on the job. He's a sergeant, detective sergeant, but dude was great.
Yeah, but you pride yourself on picking up the details, and the details fell through. I always pride myself on noticing things. And yes, while I did notice a lot of things, I never noticed this. And that's where a lot of my guilt lies.
Yeah, you would think that you're always a detective and you're always looking like that's just your, your reasoning and stuff like that. But I have that switch. I got to that switch in my career, and I think other cops can attest to this. You kind of leave the job. I'm not talking about be retired. You just come home and the switch goes off. Like you don't want to do it 24/7 anymore.
Actually, you know what? The funny thing is here's something to drive your point home. Whitey Bulger, okay? And I don't go down this YouTube rabbit hole.
Frank Costello?
No, Whitey Bulger.
Okay.
So when they caught Whitey Bulger after...
He was Frank Costello in the party.
Yes, Jack Nicholson.
Come on, get your shit together.
I thought you meant Frank Costello, the old-time gangster.
God.
With the big nose, the one of the four. But anyway.
Please.
So Whitey Bulger was the criminal in the 70s and 80s and went on a run, 15 years. They finally caught him.
I remember.
And how they caught him, and one of the case agents for the FBI was talking to Bulger, and this came out of his mouth. He was living this lifestyle of where he worked so hard at keeping his gangster edge, but then when he was on the run, he worked so hard at being a civilian and hiding in plain sight type of thing. How they caught him was they said, your storage unit was broken into, come down to the garage and just check it out, make sure tell us what's missing. And he told the case agent for the FBI, he goes, I lost the gangster edge. I lost that edge. I turned that switch off because in my old days, I would have never come down to that garage. I would have sent somebody down there and I would have smelled the trap. Right?
Yeah.
So it happens in all different walks of life, not just police.
You get dulled, and I can't say that was 100% with that, but I wasn't really, I wasn't thinking like that. I wasn't thinking anything like that.
So Bob, we're coming to the end. Okay. Now we both have this guilt that's inside of us, and we're trying to use our guilt as in some sort of positive way, because I do believe that is the path to overcoming everything.
I agree.
If you take your guilt, you take your suffering. There's a lot of suffering inside of guilt. And you've gone through this 10-month process of the worst possible guilt ever. What do you think it's taught you?
Sometimes when you think you're doing things the right way, and I'm big on doing things the right way, that you're really not. You got to think outside the box. You got to challenge yourself to look at everybody a little differently. You can't always think like, that's never going to happen. He's never going to do that. Or this is the way that is. There's always a chance something could happen. I think you got to look, you got to have more of an open mind. I think it's taught me that. And it's also taught me that doubt, sometimes doubting yourself is a good thing. You know, I feel this way. You know, I'm not working an investigation where I'm like, you know, this is the direction. You know, I know it. I feel it. You know, this is like life. So it's okay to like doubt how a person is, you know, or how a situation is, and think, okay, what's the opposite side of this? And then look at it like, you know, you're investigating it instead of just being steadfast on, this is the way I think now. This is my idea. This is the way I am. And tough shit if you don't like it, because then you're going to have a shitload of guilt, which I have. And
these things are all things that we know, because those big cases that you solved, those big things, were you thinking of something that somebody didn't think about, right?
Mm.
You're thinking outside of the box. You're thinking in a different way. But the one thing I want to impress upon everybody is, if you're feeling guilty about anything and you cannot make amends for that guilt immediately, the person's not here, situation's gone, there's just no way to make amends, all I can caution people is to use that guilt as fuel on something else. You know, you pay that guilt forward a little bit.
I always prided myself on being spiritual in the sense that, you know, I believe in God, I pray. I mean, I always wear Jesus, Jesus is king, you know, something like on my body. Like I relate to, I'm not a religious person. I would be more spiritual. You know, I am a Catholic, but I have become closer to and more spiritual since he passed, because I look for guidance a lot more now, you know, and besides my sobriety, I believe, I have a lot of faith, and I feel like that gives me some solace that, you know, okay, you know, you'll get through anything if you have that. You know what I mean? That's just the way I think now. And maybe before then I wasn't as, you know, I think it brought me closer to God. You know what I mean? In that sense of how I feel spiritually, you know?
So one of my, you know, while I believe Jesus is divine and perfect and all this stuff, one of the people in the Bible that I resonate most with, and I've had this way since I was a teenager, is King David. And the reason that I resonate with King David is he was a nobody. He was nothing, and he was anointed king, and he was capable of these wonderful things, that being the greatest king that Israel had ever had. He was told from a very early time, your lineage is going to change the world, because Jesus was from the house of David. But here's the thing: David fucked up all the time. He sent.
He was a colossal fuck up.
He was. He fell in love with Bathsheba, sent her husband Uriah off to the front lines, goes to get killed so he can have Bathsheba all to himself. Stuff like that, really fucked up stuff. However, he wrote the Psalms. He wrote like 80% of the Psalms, which are the most meaningful things that you could pick up the book, open up Psalms, and find something that relates to your life.
Relate to, yeah.
And that's why I resonate with him, because while he was incredible and divine and anointed and loved by God,
he was imperfect.
And that's me.
Yep.
In a nutshell, I am the total imperfect person.
Well,
and
you
there's
just look at you and see that. I mean, come on, look at your face.
Suck a dick.
Oh, you got it in.
So anyway, Bobby, thank you so much for coming in here. I know it's a little tough to talk about, but I do appreciate you. I do, even though I don't say that enough.
I know you do.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast, The Suffering of Guilt with Bobby Crudele. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned. Hold on to your beliefs and principles, but be unafraid. There are many levels of guilt. Guilt can be used as fuel, but most importantly, as it pertains to guilt, you can either be the victor or you can be the victim. Choose to be the victor. And that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to go to popple.com, put in the code TSP20 for a 20% discount on your digital business card. Follow us on all social media. That's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, X, OnlyFans. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. Follow Bobby at Bobby_Crudele. And of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.